Famous people who passed away in 1780. Before we proceed, please subscribe to our channel to support us. Thomas Hutchinson. He was born in September 1711 and he died in June 1780. His age was 68 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was stroke. He was an American merchant, politician, historian, and colonial administrator who repeatedly served as governor of the province of Massachusetts Bay in the years leading to the American Revolution. He has been described as the most important figure on the Loyalist side in pre-revolutionary Massachusetts. Johann de Heide. He was born in June 1721 and he died in August 1780. His age was 59 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was battle wounds. He was a German-French military officer who served as a major general in the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War. He was mortally wounded while fighting against the British Army during the Battle of Camden. Enos Poor. He was born in June 1736 and he died in September 1780. His age was 44 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was typhus. He was a brigadier general in the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War. He was a shipbuilder and merchant from Exeter, New Hampshire. He supported the separatists as early as the Stamp Act protests in 1765. He served on various committees for Exeter throughout the period of rising rebellion. William Cookworthy. He was born in April 1705 and he died in October 1780. His age was 75 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English Quaker minister, a successful pharmacist, and an innovator in several fields of technology. He was the first person in Britain to discover how to make hard paste, Proclean, like that imported from China. He subsequently discovered China clay in Cornwall. Sir James Stewart. He was born in October 1712 and he died in November 1780. His age was 68 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a prominent Scottish Jacobite and author of probably the first systemic treatise written in English about economics, and the first book in English with political economy in the title. Duchess Louise of Brunswick Wolfenbüttel. She was born in January 1722 and she died in January 1780. Her age was 57 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was a daughter of Ferdinand Albert II, Duke of Brunswick Wolfenbüttel, and his wife, Duchess Antoinette. She was known for her influence in the courts of Brunswick and Berlin. Johan Rudolph Chy. He was born in December 1716 and he died in January 1780. His age was 63 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Swiss agronomist who founded the Economic Society of Bern in 1758. He was a wealthy merchant, economist, and lawyer. He advanced Swiss agriculture through innovations and education. Samuel Agaton. He was born in December 1711 and he died in February 1780. His age was 69 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a British landowner and politician who sat in the House of Commons from 1754 to 1780. He was re-elected unopposed at the general elections in 1761, 1768, and 1774, and he sat until his death in 1780. William Blackstone. He was born in July 1723 and he died in February 1780. His age was 56 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was high blood pressure. and diabetes. He was an English jurist, justice, and Troy politician, most noted for his commentaries on the law of England, which became the best-known description of the doctrines of the English common law. Empress Maria Theresa of Austria. She was born in May 1717 and she died in November 1780. Her age was 63 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was the ruler of Habsburg's dominions from 1740 until her death in 1780, the only woman to hold the position. Sua jure, she was a sovereign of Austria, Hungary, Croatia, Bohemia, Transylvania, Mantua, Milan, Galicia and Lodomeria, the Austrian Netherlands, and Parma. Andreas Felix Von UIL. He was born in May 1706 and he died in February 1780. His age was 73 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a German historian and librarian. In 1727, he became the librarian of German National Library, and in 1734, he was appointed educator of the Bavarian princess Clemens und Maxi. He was also appointed as a member of the Bavarian Academy of Sciences. Christy Jonas Donelitis. He was born in January 1714 and he died in February 1780. His age was 66 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Prussian-Lithuanian poet and Lutheran pastor. He lived and worked in Lithuania, a territory in the Kingdom of Prussia that has sizable Lithuanian-speaking minority. He wrote the first classic Lithuanian language poem, The Seasons, which became one of the principal works of Lithuanian poetry. Prince Charles Alexander of Lorraine. He was born in December 1712 and he died in July 1780. His age was 67 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an Austrian general and soldier, field marshal of the Imperial Army, and the governor of Austrian Netherlands. During the War of the Austrian Succession, he was one of the principal Austrian military commanders. He was notable for his defeats by better trained and superior forces under Frederick the Great. Elizabeth Butler. She was born in 1758 and she died in 1780. Her age was 22 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was execution. She was an English woman who was tried and executed for the murder of her illegitimate newborn child. She said that the child was born alive and that she had thrown her down unnecessarily into the river and buried the placenta. Unusually for an unmarried woman, she was not charged as a mother, that is, under the Concealment of Birth of Bastards Act 1623. Charles I, Duke of Brunswick, Wolfenbüttel. He was born in August 1713 and he died in March 1780. His age was 66 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Duke of Brunswick. Lüneburg, regained as a Prince of Brunswick, Wolfenbüttel, from 1735 until his death. When the American Revolution began in 1775, Prince Charles saw an opportunity to replenish the duchy's treasury by renting its army to the Great Britain. Ulrika Stromfeld. She was born in 1724 and she died in April 1780. Her age was 56 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was a politically active Swedish noble and courtier. She is known for her part in the attempted coup d'etat of Queen Louise Ulrika in 1756. She was an influential figure in the Swedish royal court. Jacob Felner. He was born in July 1722 and he died in December 1780. His age was 58 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was the most important Baroque architect of his generation in Hungary. Although untrained, his skills and knowledge gained through experience made him one of the most sought-after architects of his day. John Fothergill. He was born in March 1712 and he died in December 1780. His age was 68 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was prostate cancer. He was an English physician, plant collector, and philanthropist, and Quaker. His medical writings were influential, and he built up a sizable botanic garden in what is now West Ham Park in London. Thomas Dilworth. He was born in 1710 and he died in 1780. His age was 70 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English cleric and author of a widely used school book both in Great Britain and America, a new guidebook to the English tongue. Noah Webster, as a boy, studied Dilworth's book and was inspired partly by it to create its own spelling book on completely different principles, using pictures and stories of interest to children. Charles Hardy. He was born in 1714 and he died in May 1780. His age was 66 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Royal Navy officer and politician who sat in the House of Commons between 1764 and 1780. He served as colonial governor of New York from 1755 to 1757. He was knighted in 1755. During his term, he was made Rear Admiral of the Blue. Thomas Townsend. He was born in June 1701 and he died in May 1780. His age was 78 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a British Whig politician who sat in the House of Commons for 52 years from 1722 to 1774. He was a regular attender in Parliament and made occasional speeches. His son Thomas became a prominent politician and was created Viscount Sidney in 1789. Charles Batu. He was born in May 1713 and he died in July 1780. His age was 67 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French philosopher and writer on aesthetics. Strictly in aesthetics terms, Batu says the single principle of fine arts in imitation of nature, and this in terms of ideal of perfection to make a harmonious whole. Let's choose the most beautiful parts of nature to make an exquisite whole, more perfect than nature, but never ending to be natural. Gart Shaing. He was born in May 1722 and he died in July 1780. His age was 58 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Norwegian historian. His history research journal was interrupted on August 1775 when the king appointed him the head of the Royal Archives in Copenhagen. When he died in 1780, his work on an improved Norwegian history went uncompleted. He was among the earliest historians of Norway. Louis Lacroix. He was born in June 1711 and he died in July 1780. His age was 69 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French Sulpician priest and theologian and a doctor of the Sorbonne. Most of what he wrote was in collaboration. Nearly all writings of him were included by Mega in his Theologiae Cursus Completus. His modernization and kindliness gained the esteem and goodwill of both Buffon and Marmontel. Etienne Bonneau de Condillac. He was born in September 1714 and he died in August 1780. His age was 65 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French philosopher, epistemologist, and a Catholic priest who studied in such areas as psychology and philosophy of the mind. He was a major figure in Enlightenment philosophy. He devoted his whole life, with the exception of an interval as a court-appointed tutor to the court of Parma, to speculative thought. John Fielding, he was born in September 1721 and he died in September 1780. His age was 58 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English magistrate and social reformer of the 18th century. He was the younger half-brother of novelist, playwright, and chief magistrate Henry Fielding. Despite being blinded in an accident at the age of 19, John set up his own business and in his spare time studied law with Henry, known as the Blind Beak. Fielding advanced policing in London. JMA Suu, he was born in July 1713 and he died in August 1780. His age was 67 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French architect in the international circle that introduced neoclassicism. His most famous work was the Panthéon in Paris, built from 1755 onwards, originally as a church dedicated to Saint Genevieve. Françoise Bessaport, she was born in April 1701 and she died in September 1780. Her age was 79 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was a French painter from 1741 until her death. She served as a royal painter for the King's Garden and Cabinet, an unprecedented appointment for a woman artist at the time. King Louis XV of France commissioned her to teach his daughters, the royal princess, how to paint flowers. Jeanne-Marie Le Prince de Beaumont, she was born in April 1711 and she died in September 1780. Her age was 69 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was a French novelist who wrote the best-known version of Beauty and the Beast. Although she was a successful writer for her time, her works sometimes shadowed her publishing on topics of socio-political issues. Within many of her other works, she discussed reform of the roles of women in society. Jacob Rodrigues Pira, he was born in April 1715 and he died in September 1780. His age was 65 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Portuguese Jewish educator and academic. He was the first teacher of deaf patients in France. He formulated science of numbers and pronunciation and adapted one popular bonnet's manual alphabets by adding 30 hand shapes, each corresponding to a sound instead of a letter. James Cecil, 6th Earl of Salisbury, he was born in October 1713 and he died in September 1780. His age was 66 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a British nobleman, politician, and peer. He was the son of James Cecil, the 5th Earl of Salisbury, and his wife, Anne Cecil, Countess of Salisbury. He was known for his irregular life as the Wicked Earl. Marie-Anne de Vichy-Chambon, Marquis de Dufont, she was born in September 1696 and she died in September 1780. Her age was 83 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was a French hostess and patron of the arts. Educated at a convent in Paris, she showed great intelligence and a skeptical cynical turn of mind. The abbess of the convent, alarmed at the freedom of her views, arranged for Jean-Baptiste Massillon to visit and reason with her, but he accomplished nothing. John Andre, he was born in May 1750 and he died in October 1780. His age was 30 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was execution. He was a British Army officer who served as the head of Britain's intelligence operations during the American War of Independence. In September 1780, he negotiated with the Continental Army officer and turncoat Benedict Arnold, who secretly offered to turn over control of the American fort at West Point, New York, to the British. Thanks for watching the video. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Have a nice day.